Ladies and gentlemen, have you ever felt completely drawn to someone, craving their attention, only to be met with silence? It's confusing, it's frustrating, and it leaves you questioning your worth. But today, we're pulling back the curtain on emotional silence, what it really means when someone pulls away, and how you can reclaim your power without chasing clarity from someone who won't give it. If you're ready to stop overthinking and start seeing the truth clearly, let's dive into the topic. And if you value honest, empowering insight into love and self-worth, hit that subscribe button, because this is just the beginning. Craving someone and stepping forward with intention are not the same thing. Many people can feel strong attraction or desire but remain completely passive. This can be confusing when you're on the receiving end of that energy, when you sense interest but get no real action. It feels like a mixed signal, but in reality, it's not a signal at all. It's a person stuck in their own conflict, unable to convert their feelings into behavior. The truth is, desire alone doesn't drive connection forward. Action does. And action requires more than just feelings. It requires clarity, courage, and emotional maturity. So while it may be flattering to think someone wants you, the silence says more about where they are than how much they crave you. Craving without motion is noise without melody. It captures attention, but leads nowhere. It's easy to take someone's silence personally when you know there's chemistry. You start asking yourself what you did wrong or whether you're not enough to move them. But what if it's not about you? What if their silence is the result of their own inability to show up? So many people carry unhealed wounds, fears, or unresolved attachments that keep them stuck. They want love, but only on terms that feel emotionally safe, usually meaning no risk, no effort, and no vulnerability. That craving becomes a comfortable fantasy rather than a real relationship. They may imagine you, think about you, even long for you. But doing something about it would mean confronting their fear of failure or rejection. And for some, that's too heavy a cost to pay. So they stay quiet, while you're left trying to make sense of their silence. You might feel tempted to interpret silence as a challenge, like something you need to solve. That's natural. When we sense that someone is interested but hesitant, we often try to give them more reason to come forward. We become more available, more patient, more emotionally generous, thinking that maybe if we love harder, they'll finally feel brave enough to speak up. But that's not how this works. Someone who's not stepping up isn't waiting for you to give more. They're simply not in a place to give anything meaningful back. You can't coach someone into clarity. You can't inspire someone into readiness. That has to come from within them. And while you're busy proving you're worth it, they're busy proving they're not ready. People often confuse intensity of feeling with depth of love. Just because someone feels something powerful doesn't mean they know how to handle it. In fact, the stronger the craving, the more it can scare someone who doesn't trust themselves in relationships. They pull away, not because they don't care, but because they don't know how to care well. You deserve more than someone who disappears when their feelings get too loud. Love shouldn't feel like punishment for being desired. If their emotions are real, they'll find a way to express them with presence, not just intensity. Because love isn't just about what someone feels in private, it's about what they do when you're in the room. When someone says nothing but keeps appearing in small, inconsistent ways, it creates emotional confusion. You feel like there's a spark that just needs the right moment to catch fire. But the truth is, connection isn't a puzzle you're meant to solve alone. If someone can't communicate or make space for you, it's not your job to translate their silence. People who are truly ready to love won't leave you guessing. They'll create consistency, not mystery. They'll replace silence with clarity. And they'll make sure that what they feel doesn't just live in their head. It lives in their actions. Anything less becomes an emotional illusion built on the hope that one day they'll change. Desire that doesn't manifest in real behavior is often a comfort zone. It allows someone to feel something intense without taking any risk. Craving from a distance means they don't have to be accountable to you. They don't have to compromise, commit, or show up in vulnerable ways. It's a one-sided experience that costs them nothing and keeps you emotionally invested. But that kind of craving isn't romantic. It's selfish. It asks you to wait for someone who hasn't even decided to show up yet. You become stuck in an emotional holding pattern, waiting for a sign while your life remains on pause. That's not love. That's stagnation disguised as passion. True connection requires effort, not just longing. You should never be in a position where someone's silence is louder than their presence. It's tempting to think that if someone just works through their stuff, they'll come running back. But the reality is that many never do. Not because they didn't feel something, but because they weren't willing to face the discomfort that love demands. Love is brave. It risks rejection. It initiates conversations. It shows up when it's inconvenient. If someone isn't doing any of those things, their craving isn't enough. Wanting you isn't the same as choosing you. And being chosen is the only thing that counts in the end. It is time to stop romanticizing silence. Stop thinking of it as something poetic or mysterious. Silence, in the presence of desire, is avoidance. It's hiding behind fear instead of leaning into possibility. It's not your job to break down someone's emotional walls. They have to do that work themselves. Your job is to recognize when someone is stuck and not take responsibility for pulling them out. You deserve clarity. You deserve initiative. You deserve someone who doesn't just crave you when it's safe, but who values you enough to step into the unknown. Anything less is just emotional window shipping, looking but never buying in. The most important thing to understand is this: someone can feel everything for you and still not be the person who grows into what you need. You can be perfect for them, but if they're not in the right emotional space, your presence will only overwhelm them. This doesn't mean you weren't lovable. It means they weren't prepared for the level of honesty, vulnerability, and commitment that real love asks for. And sometimes that's the hardest truth to accept. But once you do, you free yourself from the burden of waiting. You begin to understand that your worth isn't measured by someone else's silence. It's measured by your ability to choose yourself over uncertainty. Craving without action is a kind of emotional theater. It stirs feelings, raises questions, and creates tension, but there's no real story being written. You deserve a story, one with words, consistency, and presence. You don't need to be in someone's head. You deserve to be in their life. You don't need to be someone's fantasy. You deserve to be someone's reality. Let their silence speak for them, and let your response be one of self-respect, not self-blame. Because love doesn't live in the mind of the one who wants you. It lives in the hands of the one who reaches for you. Always believe the reach over the craving. Silence can be deeply confusing, especially when you sense there's interest or attraction behind it. The absence of communication leaves too much space for your mind to fill in the gaps. You start wondering if you did something wrong, or worse, if you imagined the connection entirely. But sometimes silence isn't a lack of emotion, it's a form of strategy. There are those who stay silent to create tension, to see if you'll chase, to test how invested you are. It's not always malicious, but it is manipulative. This kind of silence isn't passive. It's calculated, designed to keep you guessing and off balance. It creates the illusion that they hold all the power while you sit in emotional limbo. But the moment silence becomes a game, you've already lost something far more valuable than their attention, your peace. There's another kind of silence that looks very different but feels just as heavy. It's not calculated. It's the result of emotional paralysis. Some people stay quiet because they don't know how to handle their feelings. They're overwhelmed by what they want, scared of what they might lose, or trapped in cycles of self-doubt. That silence doesn't come from strength. It comes from fear. Fear of rejection, fear of vulnerability, fear of stepping into something they don't know how to navigate. While it might feel like indifference, it's often just an emotional shutdown. But here's the key. Even if the silence is rooted in fear, that doesn't make it your responsibility. Understanding someone's silence isn't the same as justifying it. You can have empathy without making excuses. Anyway, whether silence is intentional or born of fear, the result is the same: confusion and emotional imbalance. for the one waiting on the other side. Silence becomes a mirror that reflects your deepest insecurities. You start interpreting it through the lens of your own worth instead of seeing it for what it is, a lack of communication. The longer you sit with it, the more power it holds over you, and in that space you may begin to shrink. You overanalyze every detail, trying to decipher meaning in what was never clearly spoken. But silence isn't a message, it's an absence of one, and trying to translate it only leads you deeper into uncertainty. The truth is, when someone cares, they clarify, not confuse. The danger of silence is that it invites you to perform. You start adjusting your behavior in hopes of provoking a response. Maybe if you're more available, more distant, more understanding, more mysterious, something will shift. This puts you in a reactive state, constantly reshaping yourself around someone else's lack of clarity. But relationships aren't built on one person guessing and the other withholding. They grow through mutual vulnerability, effort, and dialogue. When silence becomes the loudest part of the connection, it's not a relationship, it's an echo chamber. And the more you contort yourself to fill the void, the more disconnected you become from your own needs. You begin to work harder for someone who isn't even in the room. It's tempting to see silence as a mystery to unravel. There's a certain romanticism in thinking that someone is just figuring things out or waiting for the right time, but too often that narrative becomes a trap. It keeps you emotionally invested in potential instead of reality. You hold space for someone who isn't making room for you, and that emotional holding pattern can drain your energy, confidence, and sense of direction. The silence, instead of pushing you away, pulls you deeper into attachment. Not because it offers you anything, but because you become attached to the hope of what it could become. That hope isn't wrong, but when it's built on silence, it often leads to heartbreak. Because silence rarely transforms into certainty without action behind it. True connection doesn't require games or confusion, it requires effort, clarity, and presence. If someone wants to keep you close, they don't do it by withholding communication, they do it by showing up, by creating safety in their words and reliability in their actions. Silence, when used as a tool, creates anxiety instead of connection, and the moment your connection starts depending on how well you can tolerate anxiety, it's no longer healthy. You shouldn't have to earn someone's attention by staying patient through their silence. That's not how trust is built. That's how self-worth is chipped away. You deserve more than breadcrumbs. You deserve someone who's willing to speak, even if they're unsure, even if they're afraid, because silence may protect them, but it erodes you. Often, silence is mistaken for power. The one who speaks less seems more in control. The one who waits appears more desired. But this is a false economy in love. Power in relationships doesn't come from withholding. It comes from vulnerability, from the courage to say what you feel, even if the answer might hurt, from the ability to face discomfort instead of hiding behind silence. Real strength shows up in honesty, not evasion. So when someone chooses silence, they're not rising above the situation, they're avoiding it. And avoidance is not power, it's fear in disguise. It's not impressive to go quiet when things get real. What's impressive is someone who stays present, especially when it's uncomfortable to do so. It's important to understand that silence isn't neutral. It shapes your experience. It creates a dynamic where you're left holding the emotional weight, and over time that changes how you see yourself. You start internalizing the silence as a reflection of your value, wondering if maybe you're too much or not enough. But your worth isn't determined by someone else's voice or their lack of it. Just because someone is quiet doesn't mean you need to lower your volume. Don't silence your own needs just because someone else can't meet them. Don't make yourself smaller in hopes they'll finally speak, because silence, when met with silence, doesn't create connection. It creates emptiness. The longer you wait for someone to break their silence, the more of yourself you give away to someone who may never return the gesture. Silence may feel like a cliffhanger, but often it's the ending in disguise. When someone can't communicate, can't be honest, can't take that first step, they're showing you who they are in the most direct way possible. no words can also be a message. And it's one you have to learn to hear without making excuses for it. You don't need to be angry or bitter, but you do need to be clear. Clear that you're not waiting for someone to grow out of avoidance. Clear that your peace matters more than your curiosity. Clear that silence is not an invitation, it's a closed door. When someone is inconsistent, hesitant, or emotionally distant, it's easy to fall into the trap of overcompensating. You begin doing more, messaging first, making plans, showing up emotionally just to keep the connection alive. It becomes a quiet performance where you hope that by giving more, the other person will finally match your energy. But this approach slowly erodes your boundaries. You start accepting less than you deserve in exchange for a hope that things will improve. The relationship becomes one-sided, where your effort carries both people. This doesn't create intimacy, it creates imbalance. When someone gives you crumbs and you treat them like a feast, you teach them that they don't have to try harder. And without realizing it, you normalize emotional minimalism. Setting the bar means being clear about what you need and what you refuse to settle for. It means understanding that love isn't proven by how much you can endure in silence or how long you can wait without answers. You don't earn respect by shrinking. You earn it by holding your ground even when it's uncomfortable. It's not about being harsh, it's about being honest. If someone's presence feels inconsistent, your job isn't to decode them, it's to decide whether their behavior aligns with the relationship you want. You teach people how to treat you by what you tolerate. If you make space for uncertainty, you invite more of it. But when you honor your needs, you create space for real connection to show up, or for the wrong one to exit. There's a difference between patience and self-abandonment. Patience says, I can hold space for someone to show me who they are. Self-abandonment says, I'll keep lowering my needs just to keep someone around. Many people confuse the two and lose themselves in the process. The more you compromise without reciprocity, the more disconnected you become from your own value. This doesn't make you noble, it makes you unavailable to the kind of relationship you truly deserve. Holding space for someone should never cost you your self-respect. You can be understanding and still have standards. You can be kind and still say no. You can care about someone deeply and still choose yourself when their behavior falls short. Respect begins with consistency. Someone who values you shows it through their presence, not just their words. Inconsistency is not mysterious. It's a sign of divided attention or emotional immaturity. Yet many people mistake unpredictability for passion. They interpret mixed signals as depth, when in reality, they're just noise. When someone shows up only when it's convenient, it's not a relationship, it's a transaction. And if you reward that inconsistency with more effort, you teach them they can have access to you without being accountable to you. That's not romantic, it's reckless. You deserve someone who doesn't leave you guessing. You deserve someone whose behavior matches their feelings. Anything less will leave you emotionally starving. People often show you their limits early on. You just have to believe them. When someone's actions fluctuate, but you keep justifying it, you build a relationship on potential instead of reality. You hope they'll change if you're patient enough, or that your loyalty will inspire them to rise. But this only delays your own growth. Instead of building something real, you become addicted to waiting for someone else to evolve. Meanwhile, you ignore the truth in front of you. Consistency doesn't need to be begged for. It flows naturally when someone is emotionally available. When someone can't offer that, your job isn't to fix them, it's to protect your peace. You don't raise anyone by lowering your standards. When you pour energy into someone who's unsure, you send a message. My love will do the work for both of us. But love can't thrive on imbalance. It needs mutual intention, not just emotional effort. If one person is always initiating, holding space, and doing the emotional labor, the foundation will crack. You weren't meant to carry someone else's uncertainty. You weren't meant to prove your worth through overextension. You are not the solution to someone's confusion. If someone doesn't show up with clarity, your role isn't to wait, it's to walk away, not to punish them, but to protect yourself. Your energy deserves to be met, not managed. Every time you excuse inconsistency, you train your nervous system to accept instability. This keeps you in a cycle where unpredictability becomes normal and you mistake anxiety for chemistry. But real love doesn't make you question your place in someone's life. It reassures, it shows up, it brings peace. When you make space for someone who only shows up halfway, you end up abandoning the version of yourself that wanted the whole thing. And over time, that self, who once knew what she needed, fades into someone who only hopes to be chosen. But you were never meant to wait to be chosen. You were meant to choose yourself first and let that energy draw in someone who sees your worth clearly. It's not your job to chase clarity from someone who benefits from keeping you confused. If you keep offering emotional labor while they offer silence or mixed messages, that's not love, it's control. They get the benefit of your devotion without offering stability, and you stay caught in a loop, hoping that more effort will finally unlock the relationship you imagined. But effort alone doesn't build connection. It takes two people moving toward each other with intention. If only one is moving, you're not in a relationship. You're in pursuit. And the longer you stay in pursuit, the more you lose sight of your own direction. You begin to think that love requires chasing. But real love is mutual. It doesn't need convincing. The hardest part of holding a standard is the fear that no one will meet it. So you lower the bar, hoping that maybe if you make things easier, someone will finally stay. But lowering your standards never leads to real connection. It only leads to resentment. You start feeling bitter about what you're not receiving, even though you were the one who agreed to less. That resentment isn't random. It's your inner voice reminding you of what you deserve, and it will keep whispering until you listen. You don't have to be cruel. You don't have to issue ultimatums. You just have to be honest with yourself and with the people around you. If someone can't meet you where you are, let them go. Your job isn't to inspire effort, it's to recognize it. You're not too much for expecting consistency. You're not demanding for wanting communication. And you're not unrealistic for needing to feel safe and seen. These are the basics, not bonuses. If someone can't meet those needs, it's not your cue to compromise. It's your cue to choose better. You are allowed to want more. You are allowed to require more. And you are allowed to leave any situation that makes you feel like asking for the bare minimum is a burden. You don't have to work harder to be loved. You just have to be brave enough to stop working for love that doesn't require effort in return. Because the moment you stop rewarding crumbs, you make room for the feast you were always worthy of. Craving someone who gives you nothing but silence creates a dangerous illusion. It convinces you that your desire alone is proof of something real. You start to believe that intensity means connection, that longing must be mutual, and that your emotional hunger somehow reflects a hidden bond. But craving isn't clarity, it's emotional tension. It arises when you're fixated on what could be rather than what actually is. When someone is silent, your mind doesn't go quiet. It goes into overdrive, spinning stories to make sense of their absence. You imagine reasons for their silence that paint them in a generous light. You turn them into a mystery instead of accepting the simplicity of their behavior. And in that process, you distance yourself from truth. The danger of this craving is that it becomes self-sustaining. The more silent they are, the more deeply you dive into fantasy. You start filling in the blanks with the best case scenario. Maybe they're overwhelmed, maybe they're scared, maybe they're taking their time. But those explanations don't come from evidence, they come from your need for resolution. You're not reading their actions, you're rewriting them. And craving only grows stronger in the absence of communication because imagination takes the wheel. This is how you become emotionally loyal to someone who's never shown you consistency. You keep reaching out mentally and emotionally even as they remain distant. It's not love that keeps you stuck. It's the need to solve the riddle their silence creates. There's something deeply addictive about emotional unpredictability. When someone shows up inconsistently, Every bit of attention feels like a reward. You begin to crave those brief moments of contact, those tiny signals that seem to hint at something more. And when they disappear again, you wait with hope. That waiting conditions you. It makes you believe that patience equals depth, that suffering is somehow meaningful. But this is not connection. It's a pattern of reinforcement. You get caught in a cycle where the absence becomes the hook and the return becomes the high. It's not romantic, it's psychological conditioning. And the longer you stay in that cycle, the more you confuse craving with compatibility. Craving isn't just about wanting someone, it's also about wanting validation. You start needing their attention to feel worthy. Their silence becomes a test of your value. You ask yourself what you did wrong, why you weren't enough, or whether you somehow pushed them away. But you didn't cause their silence, they chose it. Craving convinces you otherwise. It turns their absence into your responsibility. And the more you internalize that, the more desperate you become to fix something that isn't yours to fix. You try harder, reach out more, overthink every word. Not because they asked you to, but because craving tricks you into believing that your effort will earn a reward. That if you care deeply enough, they'll finally speak. The truth is, silence is a form of communication. It tells you everything you need to know, even if it's not what you want to hear. When someone doesn't respond, they are showing you where they stand. When someone doesn't reach out, that's a choice, not an accident. But craving blurs this reality. It makes you rationalize silence instead of recognizing it. You start treating their lack of effort as a puzzle instead of a boundary. And you keep investing more emotional energy trying to prove your worth to someone who isn't showing up. But connection isn't built by one person proving themselves. It's built by two people meeting each other halfway. If they're not stepping forward, no amount of craving will pull them closer. Craving often comes from a place of emotional scarcity. Somewhere deep down, there's a part of you that believes love must be earned through struggle, that attention is something you must chase. Maybe that's a wound from childhood or a story you absorbed through past relationships. Either way, the craving grows louder when you associate silence with a test of loyalty. But love isn't a maze. It's not a game of endurance. The right connection won't require you to guess, to ache, or to suffer in silence. Craving can be intense, yes, but it's not always honest. Just because something feels powerful doesn't mean it's right. Sometimes the strongest pull leads you away from peace, not toward love. Letting go of the craving doesn't mean you didn't care. It doesn't mean your emotions weren't real. It simply means you've decided to stop feeding a fire that only burns you. You've decided to choose yourself over the fantasy of being chosen. And that's not giving up. It's growing up. It's realizing that you don't need to beg for clarity. That someone who genuinely values you will never leave you in emotional limbo. The silence may still hurt, but it no longer holds power over you. You don't need to decode it. You don't need to wait for it to break. You just need to trust that your desire for connection is valid and that you deserve someone who feels the same and shows it. Craving thrives on hope, but not all hope is healthy. There's hope that uplifts you, that inspires patience and faith in love's timing. But there's also hope that drains you. The kind that clings to potential instead of patterns. The kind that sees silence as a phase instead of a message. That kind of hope keeps you stuck. It's dressed up in optimism, but rooted in denial. You can have hope and still be honest. You can want something to work and still admit when it's not. Craving without reciprocity is a slow emotional bleed. It takes your time, your energy, and your self-respect. And the longer you stay in that space, the harder it becomes to remember what healthy love feels like. Healing begins when you separate your desire from their behavior. When you stop asking whether you're enough for someone who won't even speak, when you stop measuring your worth through their attention or lack of it. The craving may still echo, but you no longer obey it. You start making choices from clarity, not confusion, from self-worth, not self-doubt. And slowly, your emotional landscape changes. The silence no longer defines you. The craving loses its grip. And in that space, something beautiful happens. You begin to crave something new. Peace, truth, mutual effort, the kind of connection that doesn't leave you wondering, because it never disappears, because it communicates, because it chooses you, openly and without delay. In the end, craving is a symptom, not a destination. It tells you where you're still hungry, where you're still hoping, where you're still giving away your power. But it also offers a map back to yourself, to the parts of you that need attention, love and validation, not from someone else, but from within. Because once you give yourself the love you've been chasing, silence loses its sting, the craving fades. And you realize the kind of love you longed for was never meant to be silent. It was meant to speak, to show up, and to stay. And now, so are you.